What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, we've got Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing this fine Tuesday evening?
It may not be a high bar, but I'll say that I'm doing better than Kings fans right now. It's just amazing how they're somehow losing, at least at this point, 7-0 to Buffalo of all teams. So we'll see if the coach change does anything. I'm not sure what's left in the chamber for them at this point.
Who feels worse, Kings fans or people who drafted Alex Tuch at the end of the first round?
I think Kings fans, because they had a taste of something that was potentially good. I was never a fan for Tuch, to be honest, but it's easy to say now.
Yeah, well, yeah, in hindsight, obviously, it looks good. But, yeah, that's a tough one for sure. All right, well, we have got a ton to talk about here on our twice-weekly midweek show on the Keeping Karlsson feed. You can always find us for 20 to 35 minutes, as long as Elon isn't here. Then sometimes it'll take us a little deeper. Actually, Elon will be here on Thursday with Derek because he's doing a little bit of switching up with Jeremy, who's been doing some of the matchup maximizer and doing an excellent job. If you haven't been listening to that show, I really recommend it. It's a good one. But let's get into the headlines here. We'll follow up some injuries and outjuries and finish, as always, with some hot and cold streaks. We've got some interesting ones with some folks who are pretty widely available. So that could be a good one there towards the end of the show. But let's start out with the big news of the week. Morgan Rielly suspended for 5 games for retaliating against Ridley Gregg, who took a slap shot into the empty net at the end of a match against Toronto. Obviously not the smartest move. We heard from Elon and his righteous dad indignation, which is a fun side of him to see there. There are kids watching. I thought that was outstanding on the Sunday show. If you haven't heard it yet, definitely worth your time. It's in it's relatively close to the right around the middle, I think, of episode 1. But so that finally came out with a 5-game suspension. Jake McCabe has taken over the top power play. That power play has not scored yet here, although it is without some of its weapons, not just Morgan Rielly, but also John Tavares and Mitch Marner are out on Tuesday with an illness. Hopefully that is just temporary. Although there is a little bit of worry maybe since Connor Timmins, I believe, came down with mono. But if either of those gentlemen has gotten that out of the way sometime previous, not worried about that. Certainly not going to speculate here that it's anything more than just one of those illnesses that keeps you out for a game. Anyway, talking back about that Rielly suspension, it fell right about sort of where I thought it would. There was a lot of, obviously, chatter about it on hockey Twitter, discussing it. You think that's about appropriate for what took place?
At this point, I feel like it's just throwing a dartboard, guessing at what the suspensions are going to be. But honestly, in my opinion, end of the game, I was honestly surprised it was 5. I was happy that it was at least that, just because the way I look at it, it's bad to match up suspensions because they all look it differently. But if Perron got 6 for what he did, I'm thinking about sticking up for a guy that got, sucker punched, then I feel like 5 is at least enough for Rielly for hitting a guy because he scored a goal on an empty net.
Yeah, I don't know that it necessarily matters the way that you go ahead and do it. And I'll just, I thought Elon had kind of the best piece of commentary there, which was nothing really shows that they got to you than having that kind of over-the-top reaction. So, you got Morgan Rielly, and now you're going to sit on the sideline for 5 games while Jake McCabe takes your spot. So, you've got that to think about. So anyway, we'll look and see if that does anything for McCabe. He has been a quality peripherals guy. Tonight, just we're here in the third period, not much time left. He's managed 5 hits, and that's all that we've seen from him. So maybe he really felt like he had to pick up where Morgan Rielly left off. All right. Well, next piece of news here. We got a whole bunch of stuff from the Sharks. Give us the rundown from San Jose. We've got all kinds of changes. We've got some. This is like the whole show in one little bit here. We've got some hot streaks. We've got some outries and injuries. So what's the deal?
So crazy part is that this is just kind of a short form. There's more injuries and outries that I cut out. But for the big four is that Hertl and Couture are out week to week. Hertl with a surgery on his knees, so that one I would say is probably a longer forecast than Couture, but right now both of them are labeled week to week. And Granlund and Ferraro are expected to be able to play tomorrow. So that's kind of the big thing, is that Granlund had some good time when he came back or was playing. And most of that time, honestly, was without Couture. We'll see without Hertl if he can keep up playing. He had 6 points in 7 games recently. So with all that kind of mess up, the top power play is Addison, Granlund, Eklund, Duclair, and Zetterlund, which are probably the last set of forwards that you might want to care about, namely Granlund and Eklund in my mind. And then you have Ferraro being the power play quarterback for the second power play. And he's known for all the hits and blocks, so if he can randomly get a power play point here and there, that's going to be a nice thing. And then something to keep in mind is I did bring up Eklund, and you might be like, why are you talking about him? Is that he has been playing center now for a little bit with these injuries, and in the last 3 games, I know they were far back, I forget exactly how far, but in his last 3 games, he has 5 assists, so he might not be scoring goals, but he is actually getting points, and he's really the driver of the line he's on, so this schedule is not the greatest right now, but maybe something to keep in mind in your deep leagues, or if you have an injury fill-in, that, yes, it is the Sharks, but Eklund could be someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think there's value in finding those players who are going to get lots of minutes, especially, the team's got nothing really to lose. Let's see what the young guys have got, turn them loose a little bit. I think that's not a bad idea at all, to see what value can be mined even from a team, like the Sharks that maybe doesn't offer a whole ton. All right, and on to one other guy that we've been talking about a fair bit, and that is Wyatt Johnston. I was talking on Thursday about not falling in love with a player too much and letting it cause you some trouble. And Wyatt Johnston was one of those players. I really enjoyed, obviously, having him on my team. It was fun to talk about the every other game streak. So he did spend the most recent game down on the third line instead of enjoying Joe Pavelski's spot up on the first line. Obviously, well, not obviously, but he did not manage to score from that spot. And I think if Wyatt is on line 3 and power play 2, I don't think there's any reason to hang on for him. So that was a guy that I jumped off of when I had the chance. If he moves back up, great. Would love to see it. But, that was Pavelski's spot before, and it is now his again. So I wouldn't expect things to change all that rapidly. So in all likelihood, I think we are off the Wyatt train here and on to bigger and better things. I'm sure there's interesting free agents sitting around, and we'll talk about some of them a little bit later on in the show here. All right, one other little bit of kind of late breaking news here. We do have a couple of hat tricks that we can tell you about from Tuesday's action. One from Brady Tkachuk. I'm sure Daniil Tarasov was a pretty, simple-looking opposition for your Ottawa Senators if you had the chance there. But the more surprising one is Bobby McMahon of the Toronto Maple Leafs scoring his 3rd, 4th, and 5th goals of the season, that 5th into the empty net to give him his hat trick. I'm sure very exciting for him. Probably not so exciting for fantasy owners because outside of Mama McMahon, I don't imagine a whole lot of people were rostering him. So maybe in those very deep leagues, or in maybe Elon has picked him up, and we'll be talking all about him on Sunday for the Dynasty League. But some exciting stuff there from a little bit of news update. So moving on, we got some injuries and outries. We got an update on Antti Raanta. He is expected to miss at least a few weeks. Once again, the net appears to be Peter Kochetkov's for the foreseeable future. Canes do have a back-to-back this week and next, so you should see Spencer Martin get a start each of those weeks while Antti Raanta is out. So if you can, plan out, game out your goaltending streaming situation there could be useful for you. And then we saw Ville Husso return to the net in Detroit. Playing against the Oilers, it is unfortunately for him, about halfway through the first period, it is 2-0. Obviously, the Oilers have a lot of firepower there, but maybe not the return to play that Husso was kind of hoping for. Certainly not what Red Wings fans were hoping for either. And then I know you've got a couple updates for us from the Ducks, a whole bunch of updates from the Ducks, in fact.
Oh, yeah, I guess a lot of things are happening in California. So first with the Sharks and now with the Ducks. The first one is it looks like Gibson is healthy enough to back up. With the way the Ducks are playing, maybe they'll throw him back in because Dostal's not doing so well. But for that slight injury that he had, he's back, so nothing to worry there. And then on that same span of injuries, we could talk about Mintyukov and McTavish. I'm not sure if there's been any power plays for the Ducks, so I can't say about who's doing that, but Mintyukov was on the third pair, so not really sure how much value he had. He's not really much of a hits and blocks guy, maybe a few blocks, so I wouldn't be rushing to pick him up. I wasn't really interested in Cam Fowler when he had everything, so with a split, that's probably just going to muddle both. And then McTavish is centering a line with Vetrano and Terry, with Carlson having Strome and Henrique on his wings. So something to keep an eye on. I'm not sure with the way this game is going against the Habs if this is going to stick, but two players to be talking about coming back. And on the third end is that Killorn, who was doing well before his injury, traveled with the team for their 4-game road trip. So it seems to be possibly ahead of schedule, but it's a nice thing to keep an eye on that. Like for players that had him, I have him on my IR, that there's a potential that Killorn could come back and hopefully with, say, a Carlson or a McTavish as a center could become a productive player on your team when he's healthy again.
Yeah, and I can give you a bit of an update on that power play defenseman situation. It looks like they spent a little more than 2 minutes on the power play. Cam Fowler has had 54%, but it looks like that is the second unit because he the same amount of time is Adam Henrique, Jakob Silfverberg, Ryan Strome, and Frank Vetrano. It does look like Mintyukov is out there with Max Jones, Troy Terry, Mason McTavish, and Leo Carlson. One of those things is kind of not like the others, but that is the lineup that they had out there, and I do think that is probably the top power play. So good sign for folks who were patient and hung on with Mintyukov, because it does look like he's out there with the top skill players. Let's see here. We also got a couple more updates before we head into an ad break. Connor Bedard is going to remain in a non-contact jersey this week, but Coach Luke Richardson is hopeful that he can start getting underway for some real practice early next week and be ready for games shortly after that. That obviously is as he recovers from a broken jaw that he suffered. Would obviously be exciting for him to get his season back on track. And it'll certainly be interesting to watch if he can sort of duke it out with the first hot player from our hot and cold streaks section who might be dueling him for the Calder Trophy. The other update is Anton Forsberg made his return. Not maybe the greatest outing, allowed, I believe, 3 goals to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So that might be a so far situation. I don't think that game has ended yet. But part of Korpisalo's value was that no one was really behind him. And if Forsberg is healthy and can play decently, he could certainly eat into Korpisalo's value. Korpi has not done a whole lot to acquit himself or really do much of anything to show that he is a reliable backstop. So I imagine Ottawa is looking for anybody that they can get to make a save for them. So that brings us to the end of our injuries and outjuries section. We're going to take a quick break here. On the other side, hot and cold streaks, including some folks who are pretty widely available. So hopefully someone you can get into your lineup. You'll see it on the other side. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. We promised you we would highlight a player who is on fire and is really kind of, we think that he's going to make a race of this Calder Trophy that seemed like might inevitably belong to Connor Bedard. But that, of course, is Brock Faber, the freshman defenseman for the Minnesota Wild. 13 points in his last 10 games played, just racking up the assists. Some pretty solid power play production. During that 10-game streak, he's got 6 points on the power play, so 6 of his 13. So obviously really making hay there. It's pretty exciting. We haven't really had someone, sort of playing this high quality. We saw maybe a flash or two early on from Calen Addison, who obviously is out in San Jose now, but he was never able to do it consistently. Faber also will do quite a bit more for you in the blocks and even, a hit here and there, maybe about one a game. Just really interesting. We got to start thinking about next season. And we had a question about whether he maybe has Bouchard type upside next season or in keepers. Again, we haven't really had a defenseman who's been this productive, maybe since we had that season where it seemed like Matt Dumba might flirt with 20 goals. As far as kind of the Bouchard comparison, I don't personally feel like I haven't watched enough of those two playing to kind of get a sense of their skill set. But in terms of thinking about, what we want to do for next year, hard to imagine that Minnesota would try to change up all that much of anything, given how successful he's been. I don't see him having a whole lot of challenge. They've got a lot of good, solid, defensive defensemen who can do their half of things. It's nice to have somebody who can, really drive the puck for them, especially on the power play. As a keeper, I think there certainly is some value. There is always obviously the danger of the sophomore slump, that he may not end up being as successful as he was, this time through, as teams kind of get the scouting on him and sort of learn how to disrupt his game, and he will have to adapt, obviously. I don't think that he's going to be a point per game guy. He's, even with this recent hot streak, he's at 33 points in 52 games. Bouchard might be a little far. I think give him some time to grow his game a bit. But I do think offensively he is going to be, based on his position and who's around him, I think, I would prefer him to a Mo Sider type who kind of, not the same year, but, also coming up on a team with some decent offense. Hard to make a call from too far out. But I would like him to, be a 50-point guy next season with certainly room to grow, especially if he, is for sure going to have that power play spot. It's a long way out, obviously. But yeah, I would say like 55 to 65 is a pretty decent range for him, given, what we might see him produce if he can kind of play like he's done in the second half of the year as he's gotten his feet under him. So kind of long-winded, but yeah, I think I'm settling in. That's a wide range, obviously, but we are talking about a rookie player, so I think I'm allowed to give myself a little bit of space on either side. All right. Next up, we've got a player that we're pretty excited about in Winnipeg, but who has been quite the snoozer lately. Give us the lowdown on Gabe Vilardi and why you think that folks are snoozing if they are still rostering him.
I think it's really a dance with Vilardi is that kind of the whole team is in flux. The last 3 games, they scored 2, 1, and 0. And it feels like Vilardi might be the player on the short end of the stick, because right now is that with Monahan in with the trade from Montreal. It's basically him and Scheifele have the center role, and then they have Ehlers and Connors kind of the more known wingers, and then they have Perfetti as kind of the person they want to play at the top six, and then kind of Vilardi was kind of found money with that trade before, but right now he's just kind of had only 1.77 cupful points and per average per game for the last 30 days, and then like kind of seems to be the person that's kind of gets shuffled out if they want to try anything. For example, last game they basically had Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton as a line, and then they kept the Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers line, and then the tweet literally says Perfetti, Barron, and Vilardi appear to be extras at the moment. So basically, him and Perfetti seem to be getting kind of the doghouse treatment. And then right now, he hasn't really had a history of playing well. You know, he had his flashes of mixes with injuries with the Kings. Kind of happening now is that I would be kind of contemplating dropping him. It is just really that kind of the thing is that always hesitates. Is that he's still in the top six with some good players and on the top power play. So it's going to be that one of those situations that look at your free agency, see who's there, and like, I wouldn't say rush out to drop him, but I wouldn't be holding him, say, like, for example, our next forward that we're talking about, if he was available and you had to drop Vilardi, I would make that move without contemplating.
Yeah, I've actually got two guys coming up that I think I would make that move, and I wonder if they are held as much as Vilardi here. I'm going to take a little peek. I think he might have some kind of residual hangers on from his early success. He's around the same. But he's headed in the opposite direction. -5% for Vilardi in the last day as people have started to let him go, and no points in the last 5 games. Only 3 shots during that time. Only 13 minutes in the game versus Pittsburgh, too. So, yeah, looking a little grim for a player I really like, Gabe Vilardi. He had some really nice time on my fantasy team last season, so I hate to see it. But, again, can't fall in love here. We gotta play smart. And so, definitely a guy that I would be running out to grab, make that exchange is Juraj Slafkovsky. In the last 10 games before Tuesday night, he had 6 goals, 3 assists, and 24 shots. Obviously, that 25% shooting is high, but he's getting big minutes and obviously playing with some talented line mates. Even if they haven't really been able to carry the flow of play, you know, they're not winning the expected goals battle, they're not winning the shot share. But these are, you know, still good players and, you know, certainly capable of scoring. He managed, I believe, a goal and 2 assists on Tuesday in the game against Anaheim, which ended up being a 13-save shutout for Caden Primo. So we had talked about kind of, you know, some maybe shuffling around for the Ducks as these players came out and maybe they're not all the way back yet. Slafkovsky's only 25% rostered on Yahoo. I imagine that number is quite a bit higher in the cupful, but if you are playing in a non-cupful league, he may be out there and available for you. I really like it. I was going to say, this isn't like a washed Okposo getting line 1, power play 1, and occasionally finding an acorn. Maybe that's still true, but he did find another acorn tonight, so maybe I need to lay off Okposo. But listen, you know, Slafkovsky is going to be able to keep producing, I think, as long as he has this deployment. Why wouldn't he? You know, that shooting percentage is a bit high, but he's only at 55% IPP at even strength. This is prior to Tuesday night, so those numbers may be different on Natural Stat Trick. But 55% is not a ton. He was significantly higher last year, although in a more limited sample. And he's way down at 40% IPP on the power play. Although, again, may have changed. I know at least one of his points was a power play point tonight. So I think there are going to be more opportunities for assists as he finds his confidence, even if those goals regress to the mean a bit and he stops shooting 25%. I definitely think, you know, he's out there with Caulfield and Suzuki. He's going to get tons of opportunities to prove he is worth his position in the draft. I really like this guy, and I'm shocked that he is not more widely owned. Really kicking myself because I had him for one of his kind of bad 3-game streaks and dropped him to get some more games. I really wish I still had him on my lineup now because he's been great lately. One other guy who also is not super widely owned and I think should be more widely owned is Nicholas Waugh from Vegas. What is exciting about him is that he just has been riding the Jonathan Marchessault train to success. Marchessault has scored 10 goals on 35 shots in the last 10 games, including a hat trick versus the Rangers. And Waugh has been right along for the ride, getting 3 goals and 11 assists of his own, playing with Marchessault and Barbashev. Almost all of Waugh's damage is coming at even strength, just 1 power play assist during that streak. The incredible thing about Marchessault is he does not have a single power play point in his 10 goals in the last 10 games. So listen, Waugh isn't a point per game guy in real life, but he is playing great with Marchessault right now. The Knights only play on Saturday this week, but next week he plays on Monday, and then kind of has your standard Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule. He does have dual eligibility on Yahoo for center and right wing. I would keep him on your watch list if he's available, especially if anyone dropped him for his bad schedule this week. I think that could be a really savvy pickup. Because as long as Marchessault stays hot, it seems like Waugh is going right along with him. So that could be another really nice option. I hope you're with me on this. You mentioned this before, but yeah, Vilardi, you would drop him right away for Slafkovsky for sure. And I don't know about Waugh. You didn't say anything about him yet, but I feel like you got to be on the same page as me here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, with Slafkovsky, I think he was only at like 40-something% or 50% owned in a cupful late last week. And I was telling people in my Allied chat that they were making a mistake if they didn't have him. So 100% Slafkovsky. And then I think Waugh was the same idea, is that he's with a hot player, he's getting the deployment. And the nice thing is that I would cycle him in, and then maybe it doesn't last forever, and it probably won't, but you get the points, and then if it falls off, you just go to another player. I just don't feel like he's hot enough and long enough that I would switch for either, with the understanding that even that it might be a short-term thing, and then you can find the next hot player after, and hell, Vilardi might even be around there waiting for you after.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we got one more snoozer we got to talk about over in Washington. By the way, Alex Ovechkin now with goals in 6 consecutive games, really making his managers breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. Again, don't think he's going to be able to pick things up to the point where he kind of gets to his usual points on the season to justify his draft position. But at the very least, the folks who picked him up are starting to get some relief. But that's not who we're talking about, because we want to deal with a snoozer, not a hot streak. And that is Tom Wilson. What is going on with Tommy W?
Well, the big reason why he's seen as a snoozer right now is he's basically having no exposure to Ovechkin. There was a time when they were joined at the hip, but right now it's Strome, Oshie, and Ovechkin on the top line and on the top power play. And even though that Ovechkin plays both power plays, I think he only was with Wilson for like 30 seconds today on power play. So basically right now is that he doesn't really have any exposure to any of the players, because those previous 3 were probably the most offensive, and Pacioretty would be the next on the list. And he's not even with him. He's with like Nick Dowd and somebody else with what you could call the 3rd or 4th line. So that's really the thing, is that sure, he hits and blocks and gives you those points, and depending on your leagues, that might be still having the value. But right now, without being with those offensive players, it's really hard for him to get the points, because while he has an offensive strength, I don't see him as a person that drives the line on his own. So if he's just kind of with a Nick Dowd kind of player with no, ill will to him, he's not really, your offensively minded player. He's more of a shutdown person. Is that it's going to be hard to get those goals and assists, which really help bringing these bagger forwards into prominence and worth being held, day in and day out in a league like the Cupful.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I just want to jump in with one more last little unplanned bit, and that is keep an eye on Connor Garland. He and that line with Teddy Bluger and Dakota Joshua had gone on kind of a bender for a little while, and then went cold for quite a bit, but Garland now has 2 goals in their game currently against, who's that opponent? Against Chicago. So, take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. But I think identical goals with assists from Joshua and Hronik. So that line perking up a little bit for Vancouver could be worth keeping an eye on if you need to stream. They had been, I think, a pretty interesting option previously before they kind of hit that cold streak. So just one more guy to keep an eye on. But I think we got to wrap things up here, Shams. It's been a nice show. Plenty of stuff to discuss here. Hope everybody is having a great fantasy hockey Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. And thank you for choosing to listen to us. We so appreciate it. If we can ask a favor, we would love to get some positive feedback if you're willing to leave a review and you haven't done so before. Always great for us. You can just review Keeping Karlsson wherever you get your podcast from. That helps us. You can give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK. We've been answering some questions. Brian and Elon are available at Keeping Karlsson. Use Game Day Tweets to get the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of that wasteland. Everything is nicely organized by team, and you can look at goalies and get goalie predictions. You can search for player names. There's so many very useful, just a ton of utility at GameDayTweets.com. Please visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.